Hey, this is your bald-headed geologist with another spine-tingling video. This time we're going to talk about identifying the hanging wall and the footwall. So in this instance, we're talking about faults that have a vertical displacement, or what is known as dip slip faults. So in these type of faults, you have a change in height. It's either up or down. But before we can do that, we need to identify which portion of the fault is the hanging wall and which portion of the fault is the footwall. So here we have a simple diagram. We have this diagonal line cutting across, and this is our fault plane. Sometimes we'll call it a fault line, sometimes I'll call it a fault boundary, fault trace, but it basically is the location where the displacement has occurred. On this side, in this particular instance, on the left side of the fault line, this portion of rock is below the fault plane. So in that case, this is the footwall. On the right side, this portion of rock is above the fault plane. So this is the hanging wall. There's a couple ways that we can go about trying to determine which is the hanging wall and which is the footwall. On the top here, I have a figure, and on the left side of the fault line, fault plane, this person is looking down at the fault plane. If that is the case, then that person is standing on the hanging wall since that person is above the fault plane. On the right side, we see that this person is looking up at the fault plane. If that is the case, then this person is standing on the footwall because that person is below the fault plane. Another way you can look at this is if the fault plane intersects a horizontal line. So above the horizontal line, we have 180 degrees. That tells us that one side of the fault has a larger angle than the other side. In this instance, the right side, we have the smaller angle, and that is the footwall. On the left side, where we have the largest angle, this is the hanging wall. A couple other ways that you can go about looking at this, but these are the two ways that I used to use, and hopefully that will help you. Now let's take a look at what side has moved up relative to the other. Sorry. Here is our fault line, and we have a horizontal line where the fault line intersects. So which side has the smallest angle? Well, it's over here on the left. And conversely, the right side of the fault line has the largest angle. So on the left side, since this is the smallest angle, this is our footwall. And on the right side, since this is our largest angle, this is the hanging wall. When you determine which side has moved up relative to the other, you try and look for a marker bed. A marker bed is something that is easily correlated across the fault line. I've chosen these two darker bands at the top of this image to indicate the marker bed. So as I go across the hanging wall, which way do I have to go to correlate this marker layer? Do I have to go down or do I have to go up? As we can see here, I have to go up. So in this instance, the footwall has moved up relative to the hanging wall. When that happens, you have what is called a normal fault. So a normal fault is when the footwall moves up or the hanging wall moves down. They're all relative to one another. How about this fault? It's very straight. The screen line kind of follows it. And we put a horizontal line here a little bit higher in the image than I'd like to get out of the way of the people here. So we can see On the left side, this is the largest angle, so this is our hanging wall. On the right side, this is the smallest angle, so this is our foot wall. Let's take a look at our marker beds. We have this rather large, kind of tannish colored rock, and as we move up the foot wall, we see that it is up here on the hanging wall side. So in this instance, the hanging wall has moved up relative to the foot wall. If that is the case, then you have a reverse fault. There's another type of fault that's a variation of a reverse fault. And you can see here the fault plane is almost horizontal. There is a slight increase. And so the hanging wall is the side above the fault line, and the foot wall is the side below it. When you have this type of where the hanging wall moves up relative to the foot wall, this is what's called a thrust fault. It has the same movement as a reverse fault, except the fault angle is less than 45 degrees. I won't make you determine which is a reverse fault, which is a thrust fault. Just remember, if the hanging wall moves up relative to the foot wall, we're going to call it a reverse fault.